Good day and welcome to our discussion this evening. We have a very exciting presentation by Rachel Stevens and our discussant, Dr. Sofiya Dyak. My name is Jessica Zahovich. I am director of Fulbright Ukraine, and this is the first public talk in a series of talks we will be presenting this year. Our talk tonight is entitled, What is Not Lost? Jewish Culture and History in Ukraine Today. Our featured presenter is Rachel Stevens, who received a BFA from Maryland Institute College of Art and an MFA from Syracuse University. She attended the Skowhegan School of Painting and Sculpture while still an undergrad. Rachel's passion for art serves as a flying carpet of sorts, inspiring travels and research to many countries around the world, including Fulbright research scholarships to Patan, Nepal in 2006, and Lviv, Ukraine in 2018. In Nepal, her collaboration with Buddhist icon makers culminated in installations that conceptually and aesthetically blended elements of East and West. When in Ukraine, Rachel collaborated with geographers, historians, and other artists to produce works that honored the Jewish community that populated the region prior to the Holocaust. She was hosted at the Center for Urban History in Lviv, which Dr. Sofiya Dyak, who's with us tonight, is currently director of. Rachel has received numerous grants and awards, including an award from the mayor of the City of Lviv for her work during her Fulbright year. She is also the recipient of a Paula Krasner Foundation grant and has exhibited her work internationally. Rachel served as area head of sculpture at New Mexico State University for 25 years and is now emeritus professor. She divides her life between Las Cruces, New Mexico, where she is now, and Missoula, Montana. Or maybe you're in Montana. You'll have to let us know. Dr. Sofiya Dyak is director of the Center for Urban History, as I mentioned, which is an institution that works across the fields of academic research, education, public, and digital history in Lviv, Ukraine. She received her PhD at the Institute of Philosophy and Sociology of the Polish Academy of Sciences in Warsaw, and a master's in history from Central European University, which was in Budapest, and a bachelor's in history from the Lviv National University. Her research interests include post-war urban recovery and transformation in Eastern Europe, heritage infrastructures and practices in socialist cities and their legacies. Dr. Dyak was a fellow of the German Historical Institute in Warsaw, the Gerda Henkel Foundation, the Institute for Human Sciences in Vienna, the Historical Dialogue and Accountability Program at the Institute for the Study of Human Rights at Columbia University, and the Harvard Ukrainian Research Institute. In 2019 to 2023, currently, she is a senior research fellow at the Center for Contemporary History in Potsdam. Dr. Dyak also curates exhibitions and educational projects related to rethinking the past, especially in urban public spaces. In 2010 to 2017, she was a co-curator of summer schools on Jewish history and culture at the Center for Urban History in Lviv. In 2021, she joined the board of directors of Ukraine Jewish Encounter Initiative. So we have a very exciting night ahead of us, and without further ado, I would like us to jump to our presentation by Rachel Stevens.
Okay, thank you, Jessica, and thank you so much for this invitation to participate in this celebration of the Fulbright program. And Sofiya, it's a joy to be reunited with you through Zoom or whatever this parallel feature is that we're using tonight. As Jessica said, I'm an emeritus professor of art from New Mexico State University in Las Cruces, New Mexico. Las Cruces is located on the border of Texas and Mexico. I was area head of sculpture there for 25 years. And I'm joining you today from my home in Missoula, Montana, and I'm on the other side of the border near Canada. I'm a descendant of Galician Jews. Using a contemporary map, this region historically straddles Poland and Ukraine. The region my family is from would be called Eastern Galicia, east of the city of Ternopil. So my ancestors were on another border. At one time would have been the Russian Empire. Many of my family members emigrated to the United States in the early 20th century. Those who stayed behind in Europe were upwardly mobile and enjoyed success as business people, engineers, and even a doctor. My fascination with my home region began in 2013 when I traveled to Ukraine with my husband, John, who I call Jack, Wright. A synagogue ruin that inspired me is located in Hermiliv, 11 kilometers from the village that my grandfather Abraham had emigrated from. The strong walls of Hermiliv's fortress synagogue housed a young forest. As I walked in this forest, I imagined the community that had once worshipped and celebrated in that space. I wondered if my grandfather had attended services there. Only later did I learn that his brother Osias or Osius had raised his family in Hermiliv, a town that had once been quite prosperous. Hence, the seeds for my project were planted in this forest. In Western Ukraine, few obvious features of Galicia's Jewish culture remain, as the Holocaust effectively erased Jewish culture from this region's human geography. However, remnants of Jewish culture can still be seen in the Ukrainian landscape, and my Fulbright proposal was to create artwork based on these remnants or sites. The Fulbright program offers unique opportunities for international exchange. I've been fortunate to have had 2 Fulbrights, the first being to Nepal in 2006. In Nepal, I partnered with Buddhist icon makers to create installation that blended forms from East and West. In Ukraine, I was fortunate to receive sponsorship through the Center for Urban History of East Central Europe. The knowledge and help from the center's researchers was invaluable to my work. Without the center's support, the projects would not have been realized. Through the center, I was connected with artists and scholars who also played a pivotal role in bringing this work to fruition. My husband, Jack Wright, accompanied me to Ukraine. Jack is Emeritus Professor of Geography at New Mexico State. He is a cultural geographer and a land conservationist. Jack partnered with me on 2 of the 3 projects. He also provided the love and support that enabled me to keep moving forward. I landed in Lviv on January 1st of 2018, 2 weeks prior to the official start date of my Fulbright. The Christmas season was in full swing. And throughout my 6.5 months in Lviv, I enjoyed photographing the city, striving to capture its whimsy, its taste, its beauty. And I often imagine my family members being in this place, folks who had once lived in the region and in Lviv itself. And the gentleman sitting down is my grandfather's brother, Osias or Osius. And this photo is taken probably in Hermiliv. This is his son, Lawrence, and his son, Samuel. And I assume this gentleman is a grandson. Just a month prior to my Fulbright, I learned that my cousin, Margin Kleiner, had attended Lviv Polytechnic. Margin's father, Bronislav Kleiner, owned a home near the Polytechnic, and his brother Samuel leased a flat in Lviv during the Soviet occupation. What a coincidence that Jack's and my apartment was located 3 blocks from Bronislav's former home. After the Nazis occupied Lviv, several of my family members were forced into the Lviv ghetto. An infant named Alexandra was snuck out of the ghetto and given to Polish Catholic farmers to raise. Cousin Bronislav and his family had Aryan papers. They continued to live in the city as Aryans until the Nazis caught up with them and they were shot. My family was relocated to the Janowska camp outside of Lviv. Cousin Lawrence escaped, joined a group of Polish partisans and fought the Nazis from the forest. Another family member, Rose, was rescued from a factory and lived out the rest of the war in Krakow. The rest of my family perished in the Piaski, the sand dunes outside of the Janowska camp. After the war, Rose submitted these cards on behalf of her murdered husband and son. She could not prove they had been murdered, but the cards document the last time she saw them alive. Hence, the emotional engine of my work in Lviv was powered by the vitality of the city as I experienced it in 2018 with the fate of my family and Lviv's larger Jewish community through the 1940s, through the war. In partnership with my husband, Jack, urban center scholars, artists, historians, and translators, 3 projects were completed during my Fulbright. These projects culminated as an exhibit at the Center for Urban History of East Central Europe, and 2 of these projects can continue to be experienced online. Architecturally, Lviv is a relatively intact city. Borys Orach's map, Jewish Lviv 100 Addresses, was published by the Foundation Hesed Ariya in 2010. Borys Orach was a math teacher, mentor, athlete, and an activist in the Jewish community. He was also a Holocaust survivor. On January 15th of 2018, the start of my Fulbright date, Irina Matsevko at the Center for Urban History introduced Jack and me to Borys's map. Jack and I studied the map. 100 buildings and spaces were recast as Jewish residences, businesses, libraries, schools, orphanages. Alas, only 2 synagogues remained intact as the Nazis destroyed dozens of synagogues that once populated Lviv. However, the map provided locations to open lots, playgrounds, and parks where synagogues once stood. We determined the map should be digitized and put online. Taras Nazurek of Lviv Interactive was and is the project manager for this map. The Center for Urban History published the digital map with the updated transliteration of street names, titles, and proper names in Latin characters. The digital map also contains video interviews with Borys, as well as a narrative of his life story prepared by Galina Gavrilina. Please visit this website so you can learn more about this remarkable man and the diversity of structures that once housed Lviv's Jewish community. In addition to identifying Jewish buildings and sites, Borys describes prominent members of the Jewish community before the Holocaust, and that's the image on the right. I'm going to show you a few examples of buildings from the map. The text on each slide is taken directly from the English version of Borys's map. Each site is numbered, contains current and former addresses as street names have changed, as Lviv has changed, and as well as a brief history of the building or site. This is secondary school number 52, where Borys taught math for several decades. There's a plaque mounted to the building shown at the right. In our early days of exploring Lviv, Jack and I walked by the building, and I was struck by the friendly face on the plaque. I didn't read Ukrainian at the time, but it brought me a great pleasure to later learn that the friendly face was that of Borys Orach. It was one of many serendipitous experiences I had in the early days of my Fulbright. Another building with extensive Jewish history is this gorgeous structure. Sculptures adorn many of Lviv's buildings, and this one is no exception. Today, the building serves as the site for the cafe Puzata Chata, and on many occasions, I enjoyed plates of beets and mashed potatoes there. In the left-hand slide, we see a building that served as a mikvah, or a ritual bathhouse and library. On the right-hand slide was formerly an orphanage for Jewish children. These are typical Lviv buildings, but through the tool of the map, they are now endowed with history and significance. Some sites are humble, easily missed. The slide on the left was an army can factory, whereas the building on the right is an architectural wonder. The lawyer, Borys Orach, was among the building's distinguished occupants. This expansive building, located at the base of Ivano-Franko Park, was the childhood home of Martin Boover. At first glance, the playground in this image appears whimsical, but it is the site of a Hasidic synagogue that was destroyed by the Nazis. The site continues to evolve. In August of 2021, the tile floor of the synagogue was discovered below the surface of the playground. Lviv heritage activist Sasha Nazar and his friends from the Lviv Volunteer Center relocated the tiles to the Glanzer Synagogue. And that image is on the lower right, the relocated tiles. This site serves as a metaphor for Jewish history in Lviv. So much of what was lurks just inches below the surface of the earth and just below our own perception as human beings. These images document the map as it appeared at the center in the exhibition at the Center of Urban History. In addition to the map's interactive qualities and informative text, several videos of Borys Orach can be enjoyed. So I hope you will explore Borys's map online, and this is the address. The second project is entitled Underworld, Holocaust Survival in the Sewers of Lviv. It was designed to be a walking tour. For the exhibition, texts and photos were synthesized into an experiential installation. This project is also available online. Lviv's Jewish population fluctuated in the years immediately before the Holocaust. 1/3 of Lviv's population was Jewish, and at its peak, approximately 160,000 Jews crowded into Lviv, many of whom were seeking refuge from the Nazis. By war's end, fewer than 1,000 Jews were still alive. Underworld is based on a memoir by Christine Chiger entitled The Girl in the Green Sweater. It is a remarkable story of survival. Christina was one of 10 Jews who survived for 14 months in Lviv sewers. She was 7 years old at the time. The group's survival hinged on the help of 3 Polish sewer workers. Leopold Socha was one of these men. In spite of having been a petty criminal at times, Socha risked his own life to keep the 10 Jews alive. The title of the book is based on a green sweater that Christina wore while in the sewer. Her grandmother had knitted it for her prior to the Nazi occupation. The book is written from the perspective of Christina as a 7-year-old girl. On the first day of my Fulbright, I found Christina's memoir in the center's library. She describes her life with her family before the Nazi occupation, their time living in the ghetto, and finally their chaotic descent into the sewer from which they would not emerge for 14 months. I was struck by Christina's descriptions of their locations in the sewer, made tangible by naming landmarks or buildings that were vertically adjacent to their hiding places. Many of these places were among Lviv's most distinguished sites. I experienced cognitive dissonance as I contemplated the extreme human realities coexisting above and below the ground, separated by a thin barrier of concrete and cobblestone. Jack joined me as I scoured the city, seeking out the Jews' hiding places, using Christina's descriptions as a guide. I quickly recognized that her story had to be told, and preferably experienced in situ, as a walking tour. I wanted visitors to emotionally explore the relationship between visible and hidden worlds. Jack agreed to write the text for the tour. My husband was now my project partner. The walking tour is comprised of 8 locations. A visualization of the tour was created with Andrei Linik for the exhibition at the Center of Urban History. Each location includes descriptive bilingual texts written by Jack, photographs of the site in the present and past, the location pinpointed on a Nazi-era sewer map, and an emotional or descriptive image that echoes the content of the text. Vertical black panels lean against the walls. The bilingual text introduces the story, the Jewish survivors, and the 3 Polish sewer workers who risked their lives to keep them alive. I will briefly describe the sites, often incorporating Jack's texts. Location 1, the Lviv ghetto, where the group went into the sewer. In November of 1942, the Chiger family moved into the ghetto barracks. Knowing that death was coming, Ignacy Chiger, Christina's father, and others dug a hole through the basement using spoons and shovels. Chiger and his companions entered the sewer, where they encountered 3 Polish sewer workers. The Jews cut a deal with the Poles. The Poles would keep the Jews alive in exchange for an ample amount of money. In June of 1943, the Nazis began the liquidation of the ghetto. Christina Chiger wrote, "I will never forget the panic that night when we went into the sewer. The Germans threw grenades through the manhole openings, the noise of the explosions, the darkness, the terrified screams of so many desperate people. It was beyond imagining. My father disappeared through the hole in the basement floor. I was frozen with fear. My father reached up to grab my legs, and I made a small leap into his arms. Then he set me down and turned to grab little Pavel, her brother. I was crying and screaming." Location 2, Doberman Market, where many were left behind. Their first hiding place was below Doberman Market. Christina had fond memories of the market. She could smell freshly baked bread that she had once enjoyed. Christina writes, "There was about a foot of raw sewage at our feet. Ugh, the smell, the spider webs. Everywhere you looked, there were rats underfoot, and a thick, slimy layer of worms covering the walls, the rocks, the mud. Before the war, the local women sold fresh bread and produce here. I remembered the smell of the wonderful Kulakowski bread. I closed my eyes and tried to imagine it." Location 3, Our Lady of the Snow, where they were almost caught. The group hid for 6 weeks below Our Lady of Snow Church. The group crawled through 70 centimeter sewer pipes, that's about 30 inches, to a chamber beneath what is now called Our Lady of Perpetual Help Church. I quote Christina, "This was a good omen, to hide beneath a church, as though God was watching over us. Our God, their God, it did not matter." End quote. Several Jews died when they tried to flee this location. Christina's uncle was washed away in a flood. The group was down to 11. Everyone got dysentery, but Christina still enjoyed the sounds of celebrations and liturgy coming from the church. Leopold Socha brought them food. Location 6, the palace near the Bernardine Church. My apologies. Location 4, Neptune Fountain, where they got their water. In June of 1943, Leopold Socha led the remaining 11 Jews through the narrow pipes in search of a better hiding place. For the next year, the Neptune Fountain was the source of their drinking water. Leaking pipes provided life-saving sustenance. Today, the city of Lviv shuts the fountain off during the winter. During the Second World War, the site provided water to residents year-round. Location 5, Manhole at Surpska, Viloba streets, where potatoes were dropped. This location on the walking tour is a manhole cover. It was here that Leopold Socha risked his life for the Jews when he dumped a mountain of potatoes into the manhole in broad daylight. A German police officer saw Socha and began to question him. Socha knew how to lie when needed. "They are spoiled. I've been instructed to dispose of them." And the policeman walked away. The Jews feasted on these potatoes for months. Christina remembers the joy of that day. She exclaimed, "Such a mountain of potatoes." Location 6, the palace near the Bernardine Church, where they lived for a year. In front of the Bernardine Church is a very large L-shaped storm drain, underground, of course. For 12 months, the Jews lived in this space. Eventually, the money ran out. Leopold Socha and Stefan Wróblewski, along with their wives, chose to continue to help. What had begun as a transactional relationship was now based on friendship and loyalty. Christina remembers the walls were wet and covered with mold and cobwebs. Mud covered the ground. Rats were everywhere. Her mother, Paulina Chiger, said, "It is like a palace. Here we can stay." Location 7, the place of emergence, where they rejoined the world. When the Soviets marched into Lviv in the summer of 1944, Leopold Socha waited a few days before determining it was safe for his group to emerge from the sewer. Finally, on July 27, 1944, he instructed them to crawl through a 40-centimeter sewer pipe. In inches, that's just short of 16 inches. They emerged from this manhole located in a nondescript courtyard within a beautiful Austro-Hungarian building. And I love this photo. The folks here are taking breaks from work, enjoying a smoke. There's Jack peeking around the corner. Here's the manhole. Her brother Pavel was scared and wanted to go back down, but Socha lifted him up. Pavel ran over and kissed a Soviet soldier's muddy boots. One by one, people emerged from the manhole. Christina said, "We were like cavemen, like some band of primal animals, but we were alive." End quote. "These are my Jews," Socha yelled proudly. "This is my work." People applauded. They brought bread, honey, water, barley, vodka, and kielbasa. Soviet soldiers stared in disbelief. These 10 of Lviv's 160,000 Jews had survived. Ignacy Chiger was the last to leave the sewer, like the captain of a ship. Location 8, where the Chigers lived before the war. The tour ends where Christina's life began, Kopernika 12. As a child, Christina Chiger said she felt like a princess. "My early life was like a character from a storybook fable. This was the place of my growing up, a childhood of privilege and hope cut short by ignorance and intolerance. It was where our lives were transformed, first by the Soviet occupation that threatened our freedom, and later by the German occupation that threatened our lives. It seems fitting Then in 2018, Christina's childhood home housed a bridal business. I hope it's still there. Here's another exhibition view of Underworld. The locations read, this is location 1, 2, and so forth. They read like Hebrew from right to left. An interesting anecdote of the 10 survivors, 2 couples formed underground. They went on to marry and have families. Soviet liberation brought new problems for the Jews. They left Lviv to pursue a better life in various countries, Israel, Paris, London, Germany, and the United States. The installation view on the left shows the names and photos of the 10 surviving Jews and the 3 sewer workers. Socha's photo is on the right. Socha relocated to Poland. In May of 1945, he was tragically killed when a Soviet army truck hit him as he rode his bike. The state of Israel has recognized 2 of the 3 Soviet workers, Leopold Socha, Stefan Wroblewski, and their wives, as righteous among nations. This high honor is given to non-Jews who saved the lives of Jews during the Holocaust. Another 100 people in Lviv have also received this distinction. During the course of the exhibition, Jack and I presented Underworld to several groups. Jack also led a walking tour to introduce tour guides to the story, beginning at the Lviv Ghetto Memorial. It is our hope that by digitizing Borys Orach's map and creating the Underworld walking tour, the Jewish people who were once an integral part of the fabric of Lviv can in some small way be remembered. Project 3, A Key to the City. Project 3. Early on in my grant period, on day 1 or 2, I traveled with Sofiya Dyak to a killing field outside of the Janowska camp called the Valley of Death. Sofiya explained that there was going to be a series of events in September of 2018 commemorating the 75th anniversary of the liquidation of Janowska. I felt immediately that I must contribute to this event. The mass killings outside of Janowska took place at the Piatsky sand dunes. Jewish slaves were forced to bury tens of thousands of murdered Jews. To erase the evidence of their crimes, the Nazis forced Jewish slaves to exhume and burn the corpses, then crush their bones in a bone-crushing machine. Fortunately, these men escaped, survived the Holocaust, and bore witness on those who ordered and executed these crimes against humanity. The September commemoration of the liquidation of Janowska weighed heavily on me. It was only mid-January, but in my mind, the anniversary was immediate. A week or so later, as I browsed about an outdoor market, I spotted a large rusted skeleton key with a Star of David on its end. I purchased the key. I still remember feeling its solidity, strength, and its weight in my hands. I knew I had found my key to the city, but my challenge now was to unlock how the key would manifest as a memorial to the victims of Janowska. In the Jewish tradition, a glass is broken at every wedding. It's commonly agreed that glass symbolizes the fragility and impermanence of life. Victims of Janowska were murdered in the sands, the Piatsky. When sand is melted, it becomes glass. To symbolically manifest the lives and erased bodies of the victims, I imagined the iron key being transformed into glass. To accomplish the transformation into glass, I was guided to Taras Zindra, a renowned glass artist from Lviv. Zindra set out to work. 75 keys would be cast for the memorial installation. one key for every year that has passed since the liquidation of the Janowska camp. In my mind's eye, I saw these keys glowing as if suspended in eternal dark space. In A Key to the City, I seek to make Jewish victims, souls erased from the world, symbolically visible. The installation of 75 keys. And the artist and designer Andre Linick ingeniously conceived the lighting here with LED magic. When illuminated, the keys look like they're filled with seltzer. Many viewers commented that the keys looked like bones. One young artist proclaimed that the keys reminded her of magic wands. A Key to the City. Afterward, key gifting, the Great Hall, Lviv City Hall, September 2nd, 2018. When conceiving the project, I determined that each glass key should be given away, awarded to a person or organization working on behalf of Jewish heritage or renewal in Eastern Galicia. I assembled a small group of knowledgeable people to choose recipients. Wooden cases were made by Bodan Prokasko to safely house each key. The text on the box reads, Klucz do Miasta, a key to the city, in Ukrainian. On September 2nd, 2018, people assembled in the Great Hall, Lviv City Hall, to witness the gifting and receiving of glass keys. Back in the United States, I was imported through video to introduce the project. The mayor, with Adele Dianova, presided over the event. In the image on the left, you can see the original key resting on a red pillow and the key boxes neatly stacked in the background. In the image on the right, Adele Dianova presents a key in its box as the mayor looks on. Ada was also a key recipient, recognized for her contributions to long-term research, preservation, and promotion of Jewish history and culture. She was a vital project partner as well. I will share a few images of some key recipients. Yanina Heshela receiving her key to the city. Yanina is a native of Lviv and the author of the book Through the Eyes of a 12-Year-Old Girl. She is a survivor of the Janowska camp. Some have referred to her as the Anne Frank of Lviv. The selection committee cited her personal contribution to the reclamation of memory of Lviv's pre-war Jewish communities, for maintaining connections with Lviv and maintaining a dialogue between generations. On the left, Yaroslav Hertzak, a historian and professor at Ukrainian Catholic University, receives his key. He was cited for initiating the Jewish Studies program at Ukrainian Catholic University. And on the right, Galina Gavrilina, she was a mentee of Borys Orach. She has edited his books and was recognized for her collection, publication, and popularization of Borys's scholarship on the Jewish history of Lviv. Mikhailo Vorobets and Marla Rasher Osborne both received keys to the city. Mikhailo of Rohatin was recognized for his decades of work preserving the memory and heritage of Rohatin's pre-war Jewish community. May his memory be a blessing. He passed away from COVID this year. Marla was recognized for her dissemination of Rohatyn's Jewish heritage, her tireless work to restore Rohatyn's Jewish cemeteries, establishing communication between different institutions in Rohatyn for the preservation and presentation of Jewish heritage. Marla and her husband, Jay Osborne's website, Rohatyn Jewish Heritage, is nothing short of encyclopedic. Sasha Nazar, Lviv Volunteer Center. Sasha was recognized for networking communities to discuss Jewish heritage via roundtable discussions and publications, and for his long-term restoration of the former Hasidic synagogue built for Jacob Glanzer. In 2018, Sasha led the effort to remove Jewish headstones from a street in Lviv, which the Nazis used for underpayments. Sasha works tirelessly for Jewish heritage in Lviv and the larger region. So there's some ongoing work, slow but sure. In December of 2018, Jack, with my Kleiner cousins and I, traveled to Long Island, New York, to meet with Christine Chiger-Karen and her husband, Marion, who is also a survivor. Long overdue, we presented Christina Chiger with a key to the city. David Lee Preston is the son of Helena Wind, who is also one of the 10 survivors of the Lviv sewer. In December of 2018, we met with David in Philadelphia and presented him with a key to the city in memory of his mother. The photo on the right shows Helena with Socha taken sometime after their emergence from the sewer. The affection and familiarity between Socha and Helena is powerful. And that this woman could survive these conditions, and look at her beautiful face. In March of 2020, just before the world changed, I traveled to Argentina with two of my Kleiner cousins, Scott and Katie, and to meet our cousin Edgar Wildfeuer. During the Soviet occupation of Lviv, Edgar sometimes lived with my cousin Bronislaw Kleiner up by the Lviv Polytechnic. Edgar's grandmother owned this majestic neoclassical building in Lviv city center up until the Soviet occupation. And I know many of you know this building. I will continue to travel to deliver keys to descendants of the Lviv sewer survivors, only Christina is alive, and descendants of the Polish sewer workers. So many, I'm getting the chills, so many amazing people in Lviv and Ukraine that made this project possible. This is our glass artist, Taras Zindra. Andrei Linik served as the exhibition designer, graphic designer. He was the LED lighting guy. So patient with me, Andrei. And Taras Nazarek of the Center for Urban History, who headed up the digitization of Borys Orach's map. Lower right is Taras with Jack. Basically, they're both geographers and love geeking out on maps. So many partners. And I want to close on this photo at the opening of the exhibition at the center. I'm standing between the amazing pillars of wisdom and strength, Sofiya Dyak and Irina Matsevko. Irina handled day-to-day goings and comings with the project, made sure that our I's were dotted and our T's were crossed, and Sofiya was our Captain Kirk, just making sure that we were going to get to our destination and have successful projects. So I owe so much to both of you. And finally, just a note on the Fulbright program. On the left are Jack and me with some of our pals from Fulbright Ukraine. These are the US cohort, and just about everyone in this photo can trace some ancestry to Ukraine. So in a sense, we were kind of bringing the multicultural history of Lviv back together. And on the right, we have a group from the Center for Urban History at our going away party. Just all good feelings. So, and if you're curious about my art practice, you can visit my website. Not quite updated, but I've been at it for 40 years. You'll get a lot of information there. So thank you all.
Thank you, Rachel, for this powerful and moving story and your generosity in sharing with us and with the world your family's experience and what you also discovered while you were in Lviv. It's really inspiring that this is still very much alive, evolving concept with the gift of the keys. I also wanted to mention for our audience members, if they're interested in further reading, Christina Chiger published her memoir in 2008 called The Girl in the Green Sweater, A Life in Holocaust Shadow. And I believe it has been translated into several languages. Also connected to her family story is a film by the filmmaker Agnieszka Holland that was published or released in 2011. It was a Polish-German-Canadian project and was nominated at the Academy Awards as Best Foreign Film for that year. And it was filmed on site in Lviv. So if you're interested in following up and learning more about the story of the Chiger family that Rachel is talking about, please check out those great resources. But before I continue, I would really love to turn the floor over to Dr. Sofiya Dyak, Director of Center for Urban History, who can enlighten us a little bit further about this context. And if you have questions, please feel free to put them in the chat as we're speaking, and we will have time at the end for Q&A. So Sofiya, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Jessica. Thank you, Rachel. I feel like overwhelmed and emotions and memories of the 2018 and the whole academic year. Then you were in Lviv, and your story and your experience as a sculptor, as a jacker, I think tell us something very important, how personal matters, how personal professionally matters, how it matters to connect with people, and how it transcends what is your own take, and then something bigger emerges. And I think that generally when we speak about memory projects, when we especially speaking about a memory of people who are no longer with us, about violent past, it's important to speak about cooperation. And then we have Fulbright, and then we have different programs. From our experience, it's the context when something new emerges. And it's generally when we talk about reflecting on the past in Eastern Europe, but not only in Eastern Europe, which the region which is shaped by displacement, by emigration. Everything which is local is also transnational. It's something where connections and you really feel interconnectedness. So I actually would like to begin with a few comments from the map. There are 100 and many more addresses in Lviv, but also in other towns of Ukraine, smaller or bigger, and villages, which are related to Jewish life. And I think it's important to note that Jewish life, Jewish experience is a part, an integral part of the city life, of experience, of daily existence. And then we think about, on one hand, about map as places, as buildings. I think it's also important to move beyond and think that what was destroyed, also connections between people, because people who were neighbors, whatever that, we also talk about schoolmates, university mates, people who worked together, and then exploring these personal stories of life before the Holocaust. It also makes you understand how Holocaust is destruction of Jewish life and lives, but it's also destruction of life of cities and cities. So everybody is touched. Whatever their actions is. We have we have cases of help, we have cases of betrayal, of collaboration, but we do have to, that the Holocaust does alter each place, city in really radical way. And then we have this 100 addresses. It's also about names, and recently in commemoration of Holocaust, we do see how names become. In Netherlands, the Holocaust Memorial was just opened, and the names there, one of the medium. And also in Lviv, we did whole memorial in the Jewish historical Jewish district. It's on the small square, and with the sign. So signage is about stories of buildings and sites in historical Jewish district. But the well, which was reconstructed, actually has names of neighbors, names of people who lived before 1939 around. And we were working with, it's a story which has a few implications. So when working with guides and researchers with address books of the area, we picked up names and professions, not surnames, but names and professions. For example, midwife Rosalia, or shopkeeper Haya, or butcher Solomon, and so on and so on. And then putting it, we actually came accidentally by a woman on the street, and she just basically said that her father lived in the area before the war and was a tailor. He was a Ukrainian, and she said he spoke Jewish language. So she did not know which one, but it was Yiddish. And his story was from a small town. He learned his craft from a Jewish tailor, moved to the city of Lviv, opened his shop, and everybody, so his name is like, on this well is an exception, but also a continuation through the rupture, because he lived through the war, the Ukrainian, and he continued his practice, and he his daughter lives in the same apartment. So these personal stories, I think that how we can really bring some empathy and also see this interness and see the violence that broke it. So this year we do have several anniversaries, and there are really many of them. It's 18th anniversary. Today is the first day, tomorrow will be the second. It's also the year of Lviv pogrom, and we just finished with Taras Nazaruk and Lviv Interactive, a media story publication of Lviv pogrom. And each day I walk the street, Copernica Street home. And while we were working with these materials, it's hard to walk this street because that's the images of violence which resonate. And but wherever you look at the history of building or the history of enterprise, you come with the stories of life and the stories of how destruction of life took place. So basically, I would like to conclude and with something where several few points from the projects that Rachel did, which highlighted and pushed us to think about importance of cooperation, which is interdisciplinary. And I find that when we talk about research, art, culture, people who explore in archives and then work as guides in the city, I think that we have to think about exploring Jewish history and culture as a part of the country, of the city, of village, and a part of really interdisciplinary or cross-professional cooperation, because that's something that helps to convey and helps to reach and to helps to also see the interconnectedness of society, of us as society, and the notion of return, because in some way Rachel returned to a place of her roots and did it so in such a wonderfully and amazingly powerful and creative way. We also have to keep in mind that there are so many of these returns happening each day, before COVID especially, but even right now we do have visitors, and that's a question for us living here. What does it mean? What does it imply? What is the possibility, whether it's something like 100 years of Stanislav Lem this year celebrated in Lviv, or it's which is an occasion to ask questions how he survived the war in the city of Lviv, or it's somebody knocking your door and asking to let into the apartment where his or her grandparents lived, and whether you open and whether you invite for a cup of tea. And I think that this is a type of activities that is highlights the importance of personal action and a personal choice, what we do today. For this, I'm very much grateful for Rachel and Jack for your work and for pushing us to do the projects that continue living in digital environment, which continue living in new formats. For example, 100 Addresses map is transformed into audio guide by Jewish Hasidah Aryeh organization, which are continued by artists from Warsaw, Natalia Romnik, who is exploring the architecture of survival and doing exhibition based on the places where Jewish inhabitants of Lviv, but also of other places, were hiding. And I think there's something where this, each contribution is crucial and is possibility for another, and that opens us not only to the past but hopefully to a more inclusive, solidarous future. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Sofiya.
Thank you. Do we have any questions from the audience that we would like to address? Meanwhile, I will mention that it's a special year for Fulbright. It's the 75th anniversary of the Fulbright program, which started in 1946, a not insignificant year worldwide. And our United States Chargé d'Affaires, Christina Kvien, has written a note about this anniversary that we will share next week at a jazz concert that we are hosting here in Kyiv to commemorate this anniversary. In her note, she writes, born in the immediate aftermath of World War II, with the goal of increasing mutual understanding and building peaceful relations between the US and other countries, Fulbright has cemented itself as our most vital cultural exchange program. But the impact of Fulbright cannot be measured in numbers of people who have crossed the ocean. What makes Fulbright really special is its focus on connections and creating partnerships between countries, institutions, and individuals, which is exactly what Rachel and Sofiya are doing. And I would also like to spotlight a new mentorship program for the emerging generation of researchers on both sides of the ocean that is being started here by our Fulbrightsky Kolo. This is our Ukrainian Fulbright Alumni Association. So Rachel, we hope that you will exude your confidence and energy for this younger generation of researchers here in Ukraine, because there's some wonderful things happening here. Today, September 29, is also very significant here in Kyiv, as marking the anniversary of Babyn Yar, which is part of the occasion for this talk, as a wider spotlight on Holocaust History Month, which is the month of September. So the US Embassy officially recognizes the importance of these events, and we are honored that you have shared your story with us tonight. And I also would like to encourage everyone listening to engage with us at Fulbright and America House, because we will, as I mentioned, be continuing with a series of talks and discussions on a range of topics and themes. In the pandemic environment, I think that it's especially important that we work to stay connected. So please do tune in and give us your ideas and stay in touch with us. That being said, I thought maybe I would give a chance for the two of you to follow up with any comments or final remarks if you have any questions for one another, or maybe Rachel, you would like to tell us a little bit more of your current activities. You're in Montana, I believe.
Yes. Yeah, no, I'm very encouraged by a lot of the work that is being done since my Fulbright in Lviv. During that 2-week period where Jack and I showed up early as tourists, basically, to enjoy the Christmas season, we were buying tourist maps and just trying to find information about the Jewish community in very conventional ways. Like, we were just on the street people, and outside of there were very few sites, like the old Jewish hospital, and a couple of spaces where synagogues had been, but it was very, very limited. And that was another, I think what I internalized during that 2-week period is that there was a need to make Jewish sites more visible because they are there. And it was, again, very serendipitous that we were introduced to the map by Borys Orach, and that, in a sense, became our guide. If you're taking a journey, a research journey, you need a map, and I really owe that to Borys. And so that was very meaningful. But since I've left Lviv, obviously I haven't been back because of COVID-19. But so many things have happened, so I follow things on social media with the new Wexler, I believe it's Wexler Square monument. And following the adventures of Natalia Romek, whose investigations into the sewer system and other Jewish hiding places just leave me stunned and awed. I could not do that. She's kind of the Jacques Cousteau of Jewish hiding places. I mean, she's amazing. And I look forward to seeing how that research manifests. So it seems like so much more has happened, and I really look forward to things calming down with public health, so I can return and explore anew. So, and I also wanted to, when Sofiya was talking about getting, collecting names and stories of people who have lived or worked in the Greek water. And I met with my cousin, Edgar Wildboyer, in Cordova, Argentina. He talked about his grandmother's great neoclassical house. And it just seemed like a microcosm of Lviv's multi-ethnic community was alive and well in that building. So in a sense, that building would be an interesting case study of how groups coexisted. And I'm sure there was friendships. I'm sure there were annoyances. It's an apartment building, but it's just it was such a very complex and living, just a vibrant fabric of humanity in the city at that time.
I had the good fortune of being in Ukraine during the time you had your exhibit at Center for Urban History, and I saw the keys in person, and I really appreciated and love your description of them as representing bones or seltzer water, of all these different sort of the reception of the exhibit being one that speaks on such an individual level to the participants who were able to be there. That's really, it was such a beautiful installation. And I didn't know anything about Borys Orach or his book, and the digital exhibit that you had installed also was, you could see how much work went into it. And I appreciated in this presentation also seeing kind of behind the scenes in the creation of that digital map. And I know Center for Urban History does a lot of work with the digitization of urban spaces. Mm-hmm. And for audience members out there who are interested, go to their webpage, because it's incredibly interactive and educational, and such a wonderful tool for kids too. I was wondering, Rachel, if you have done any presentations in high schools in the US, or if you've worked on the pedagogical level, because I know you are an educator. Has this project somehow entered into your teaching or engagement with students?
Well, when I went, I returned to Las Cruces after my Fulbright, and within a month or two, I gave a presentation to a very large academic and community audience. And but I retired that year, and so the research has been it's been quiet, but it's not over. And I will confess that doing this work was a very emotional experience, and COVID was a great opportunity to kind of allow the work to rest, and but the world is coming back at this point. So I haven't completely recalibrated about how this work can remanifest or how I can bring it to the community. But I think these stories, these projects need to be shared. And it's just a matter of, there's been so much upheaval with the COVID-19 that it hasn't been the opportune time to do that. So, but I also will be, I have a few extra keys and boxes I've created with the intention of distributing them to survivors of the sewer, as well as the Polish sewer workers. So, yeah. So it's been quiet. As it goes in Montana, the bears hibernate in the cold months. So in a sense, it's been a period of hibernation. But the grizzly will awaken and be very hungry.
Yeah, I was also wondering. Oh, go ahead, Sofiya.
No, I just wanted, like something that Rachel mentioned following this recent experience we had with the opening at the square, which historically was called the Jewish Square, and then Wexlarska Wexenplatz. I think that it also showed how, how much has to be done to put or to rethink the division that what is ours and what is theirs history. I think we do still have a lot of that. And this is also something that we will not be able to do with, I think that I'm not sure if we will be able to do it with big projects. I think that it's also about small projects, and many of them, because I think that we still do see Jewish culture, history, and Jewish past as something happening here, but really ours. And I think that that's something that what is ours and how to deal with. I think that it's a part also of like working with names and professions, was to humanize, to personalize, to also say that people do have multiple identities and identifications, and however different we are, the things we can relate, how to create this relation, and actually how to say that people, we are in historical Jewish quarter, but people living there were Lvivians, were people city. And 2 weeks ago, there was a book forum, and as a part of the book forum was presentation of a book about pogrom in Lviv in 1918. So it's November 1918, end of World War I, and short story, long story short, it's with a big presence of Polish military happens pogrom. And one of the quotes which I found in this very big book by Grzegorz Gauden, which like hit me into my chest, was the statement of Jewish committee of Lviv, addressing the municipality and authorities and saying that we the Jews are in people in this city and on this land, as are you, Poles and Ukrainians. And I think that something hard, it breaks one's heart to read that people who were living here, like, generation to generation, were discriminated from the right to be home. And that's actually something that in our contemporary way of dealing with memory and history, we still perpetuate this display as like not giving the right to be here at home. And I think that this is something that Rachel's project with Key, which is also not only opening the key to the city, but opening keys and acknowledging that this place is a home, with all the violence, with all the blood, with all the joy and all the human experiences. And I think it's still a very long road to walk. One knows whether it's a road with the ending, with the final stop at some point. But I think that this is something which is just very much needed as a practice in empathy, in compassion, in imagination, in seeing beyond one's very narrow view. So this project that Rachel did also pushes you to think, what is sculpture? What is memorial? So what is the format? So what is, how big it should be? And I think that, the sculpture, the key and the keys which went to individuals. I think it's a very beautiful example of how it can be not only part, but like a community building in a way.
Mm-hmm. It also,
even if,
as you say, it encourages us to imagine where the door is. What is the key unlocking?
Yeah.
Where are we all walking into different doors? Like, yeah, I just love the symbolism that you have created of unlocking passageways or closing them and keeping something for yourself. It's a wonderful social sculpture, kind of, as Sofiya is describing here. And I think also something that's really special about your project is that it doesn't privilege the professional researcher, that anybody can enter in to this space and find something to relate to and explore it. It's open in that sense. And I think that's really important also for Ukraine right now, because archives here are not they're not always accessible. It's still a process of unlocking secrets that are in the history books, but not written yet. That this is the next generation that needs the keys to the archive and the public archive, and how we memorialize and write the past should not be left up to professional researchers. But this is a conversation that belongs to everyone, not just them versus us, some capital them and us, and that this is about everyone, and it's a collaborative project that is tough to work through. The trauma is painful, and I love that you met Christina Chiger in person, and I can't wait to have coffee with you and talk more and more about that, because these memories, these oral histories will not be with us forever. The time marches on, and the sands wash away. So we have a responsibility, I think, to listen.
Yeah, Sofiya had mentioned the idea of monuments, and everything I did in Lviv, in Ukraine, was unprecedented work. If you look at my website, I make objects, I make installations. Typically, I'm the only person in the studio. There's only been 3 projects in my career where I've actually partnered with other individuals, and this was the 3rd. So everything was unprecedented. I'm an artist. I don't think of creating walking tours. And so coming to Lviv, it was this opportunity to really embrace my beginner's mind, because I'm not a historian. I know very little about, I knew very little about Lviv and Western Ukraine and my homeland. So, in relationship to A Key to the City as a project, I work a lot based on instinct and intuition, and that cab ride with you to the sands, to the Piasky Sands, Sofiya, I was just, I felt quite crushed, because I felt called to contribute, as I said before. But again, a monument is not my forte. So it was an installation that could serve as a monument based on an object. I mean, who knows what the history of that synagogue key was. Jack and I discussed it could be dark archaeology. There are people that go into the forests and with metal detectors and unearth, they're looking for metals, bullets, gold fillings, and it's a very gruesome business. And so the key itself, we don't know what that history is, but for me as an artist to hold it and to kind of receive the image of what it could be as a memorial was very, very important. But then the idea of dispersing it to recognize people throughout the community, young people, older people received keys, scholars, amateur historians, Ukrainians, Jews, Christian Herman's an amazing photographer. Many of us know his Vanished World blog. He received a key. It was international. And so it was such a great opportunity to, as you were referring to, Jessica, to kind of acknowledge this larger fabric that makes up the whole of who we are. And yeah, and that project, I really, seriously, it was given. I wasn't sitting around like, in a way I was going, what do I do? What do I do? But it looking back on it was a very smooth process of conceiving. The work was like how to get it done in that short amount of time. Yeah.
Wonderful, wonderful work. It lives a new life. It lives an afterlife, as we say in the art world, that the stories will continue, and the materiality of the talisman kind of guiding you is really, really special in this description of yours. Mm-hmm. Do we have any questions from the audience? Any final questions? We are almost out of time. We are just at time. So without further questions, comments, please feel free to email us, follow up. We are available to, respond to your other ideas when you think of them. Feel free to send us a message. And we would once again really love to thank our two featured speakers tonight, Rachel Stevens and Dr. Sofiya Dyak. Thank you so much for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you in Ukraine again, Rachel.
Yes, I can't wait to return.
Yeah. Great. All of our love to
Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much, Sofiya. Thank you both, and all of our love to your furry friend in the background. I saw your dog. He's waiting for you.
He calms down when I talk, but then when I'm not talking, he's just kind of like, what are we doing? Let's go for a walk.
Definitely. Have a good evening, everyone.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Thank you.